body of a man has been found in the Manchester ship canal. His death is being treated as unexplained.
In other news, a man's body has been found in a canal just before 5:30 this morning. The area's been cordoned off.
The body was found in the water near to Media City. Police have now told us this afternoon that it is the 20th.
We're having this discussion about the likelihood that there's a serial killer on the loose in the city. Do you think we've got a serial killer on our hands?
For years, a disturbing rumour has swirled around Manchester. A serial killer, dubbed the Pusher, is stalking the city's canals. In January 2015, the story went global when a disturbing statistic came to light. 85 bodies, most of them men, had been pulled from the water since 2008. 28 of these deaths returned an open verdict at inquest and remain unexplained. Now, an ex-murder detective is reviewing the cases of 3 men who mysteriously died in Manchester's waterways.
As an investigator, an open verdict means there's too many unanswered questions.
You just have to believe that you will get your answers sometime in life.
You're missing more with each passing year.
It needs to be investigated to find out if there is really a serial killer in this particular case.
Whenever there's a body pulled from a river or a canal, people are saying the Pusher is at work again.
It is a lot of deaths going on in Manchester's canals.
On the 10th of February 2011, the body of a young man was found in the River Irwell. Nathan Tomlinson, a trainee teacher from Stockport, had vanished after a night out 8 weeks earlier. An inquest returned an open verdict, but his mother, Tina, believes her son may have been the victim of a crime.
You go out somewhere, you think that, everybody's going to be safe, don't you? It just turned out, this particular evening, Nathan wasn't safe.
My wife keeps a shrine over in the corner there. I suppose it's just a reminder, really. But yeah, my mum tends to keep everything away, whereas we like to keep a few bits and bats on show. He was my youngest brother, so obviously my middle brother as well. With him being a baby, we always try and protect him, and he'd get away with a lot more as well because he was the youngest. But no, it was great. Lovable role, really.
I miss Nathan every day, every second. Yeah, every day. I do miss saying, get out of that bedroom now.
Nathan went missing a week before Christmas in 2010.
Nathan had gone out on the 17th of December 2010. He'd gone out with his work colleagues. It was their work Christmas do. I think they'd been into a few pubs in Manchester, and they ended up in the Mitre Bar. My last contact with Nathan on that day was just via the text, where I told him not to get too drunk. He then replied, no, I'm not, I'm pacing myself because I'm drinking shandy. Nathan left about 30 minutes past 10, told one of his colleagues he was left in the bar, obviously that he was coming home.
When Tina woke up the next morning, Nathan was nowhere to be found.
I kept ringing Nathan's phone. It didn't even ring, it just went straight to voicemail.
Please leave a message after the tone. When you finish recording, please hang up or press the hash key for more options.
Okay, right, well, I'll just, hound all his friends. But nobody had heard anything from him. Within the first week of Nathan missing, I knew something obviously bad had happened. And I think everybody else was, hopeful that he was, you know, probably just somewhere, you know, at some friends. I just knew he was dead.
At the time of Nathan's disappearance, the police released CCTV footage of a man, supposedly Nathan. Curiously, rather than walk home, he appears to walk in the opposite direction, covering 2 miles in just 22 minutes.
I'm wondering, was that him on the footage? And if it was him on the footage, I'm thinking, you know, you silly boy, why didn't you know, ring me, you know, if you were lost?
Nathan was one of 11 people to die in Manchester's canals that year. Investigators weren't able to say whether he was the victim of a crime or an accident.
Water is quite a good way of hiding the evidence if the body's in the water long enough. Water will wash away contact traces really quite rapidly. In other words, as soon as the body goes in, that process will start. So over a period of days or weeks, DNA, for example, will be eventually washed away. Any blood contamination, fibres, anything of that nature will be lost.
How can they be sure there's no serial killer? Like one every month, you're just reading more and more about it.
I can't see a reason why there's all these similarities and it's just been dismissed.
The rate of deaths around Manchester in the canal is highly suspicious.
David Plunkett was 21 when his body was pulled from the Manchester Ship Canal. An inquest concluded he accidentally drowned. But like Nathan's mother, his parents believe there are still unanswered questions.
Do you miss him more with each passing year? So I think time heals doesn't work.
If David were alive today, it would be his 33rd birthday. Anne and Michael are visiting the Northumberland beach where they scattered their son's ashes 11 years earlier.
When we went for the award ceremony to get David's degree, obviously families had taken photographs of their, you know, children in their gowns, and David's tutor very, very kindly had got this photograph done for us. David was just a month off finishing his 4-year degree course. He was awarded his degree posthumously. We'd had miscarriages before David and one after David, so he was a very precious only child.
Yes, we were blessed.
He had a lovely sense of humour. He was very loving, very affectionate. He was very kind, very generous of his time and a great generosity of spirit. I think, like a lot of only children, friendship meant a great deal to him.
As he set out that night to go to Michael's, his last words to me were, "See you in the morning, Dad."
It was the 17th of April 2004 when David set off for a night out with a friend. He never came home. His parents believe his death may not have been accidental.
At about 1:20 in the morning, our phone went, and it was Michael. And he obviously thought he was trying to get in touch with David. He said that he and David had lost each other, and I just said to close the phone, I would phone David. It took about 3 attempts before David answered it, but didn't speak. And the first thing that struck me was the quietness wherever David was. It was virtually silent. All I could hear was he was walking. That was evident from his breathing. And I just said, "Do you know where you are, David? Are you in Manchester? Do you recognise anywhere?" But no response. And then probably a good 7-8 minutes into the call, there was suddenly this ghastly screaming. I started crying, I think, handed the phone to Mike, and I made an 999 call.
The screaming that I heard made me feel as though David had seen something which had terrified him.
At 4:30, the phone just went dead. That was the beginning, really, you know, of the nightmare.
"85 people have died in Manchester's waterways in the past 6 years. In 28 of the cases, there is no clear explanation as to what happened. This unsettling statistic has fueled rumours that a serial killer is on the loose. His method, pushing victims into the water.
But the urban myth, as far as we're concerned around here, is that there's people going down the canal for shenanigans, and then they're getting pushed in. Why go down there when you know that there's so many people died from simply going down there? These people that are getting pushed in the canal, can they not get out? What's happened to them before they go in? Or is there somebody that stays on the side that doesn't let them out? It's all become very Jack the Ripper-esque. This is becoming more and more of a regular thing, and to say that it's not suspicious, it's just ridiculous. I mean, how much more suspicious do you have to make something?
For Greater Manchester Police, the challenge of keeping people safe on nights out has become a top priority.
So this area is the Undercroft, and it's a notorious stretch of waterway in Manchester. The 400-metre stretch underground, last 6 years we've had 4 deaths. And then if you include the locks either side, there's another 5. The deaths we've had down here have been a real mix. Some of them have simply been drunk people falling in. People have tried crossing the canal gates. Sometimes there have been robberies gone wrong. Sometimes the victims, sometimes the offenders have fallen in and died. We put both uniform and plainclothes patrols in here quite regularly because people can become very vulnerable down here. You all right, my friend? I cannot tell you how many issues we've had down here in terms of people getting robbed, people getting pushed in. I'm just kind of suggesting it's not a good place for you to chill out at night.
Some of the rumours suggest the pusher is targeting gay men around the Canal Street nightclub area, a well-known spot for cruising.
We know there's a lot of underreporting for issues in the Undercroft. Sometimes something's happened and we'll never even get that report because there can sometimes be a difficult conversation about what someone was doing. And we very much, we don't judge the victim. We just want to find out what's happened. But, we're realistic and we know that people don't always want to tell us.
But despite 9 deaths around the Canal Street area in the past 6 years, the statistics show bodies are turning up all over the Manchester waterways, and there's no evidence a majority of victims are gay. Sovik Pal, a 19-year-old student from India, disappeared on New Year's Eve 2012 after a night out at the Warehouse Project nightclub.
Sovik, he was a very good friend and very good child. He was full of joy and he was enjoying his studies. And he was having a very good knack of drawing and painting arts, and was very eager to make himself as a designer. And that's the reason why he would like to have his studies in Manchester as a product design engineer.
"22 days after he was reported missing, the police identified Sovik's body in the Bridgewater Canal.
I was in a state of disbelief. They told that we have found a body which seems to be of Sovik. And then I was not ready to accept that.
CCTV cameras capture his last few moments alive and show him with a man who has never been identified. A man Santanu thinks may be responsible for his son's death. Tony Blockley is a former senior detective with 35 years' experience investigating serious crime, murder, and cold cases. In partnership with the families of Nathan Tomlinson, David Plunkett, and Sovik Pal, he's examining the circumstances surrounding their deaths. He's also looking at whether there's evidence a serial killer is at work.
People will talk about how do you find out if it's a serial killer. What an investigator would be looking for is what are those links and how do they all fit together? The age and sex of a person, the location of the crime, the way that that crime was conducted. And even when you've created those links, it doesn't automatically mean there's a serial killer. However, it's a starting point. It's really important to examine the cases on an individual basis, but also to examine them as a collective.
Of the 85 deaths, the coroner has offered explanations as to what happened to 57 of the victims. But 28 cases returned an open verdict at inquest. In effect, how they came to die remains a mystery.
In my experience, I certainly have had 1 or 2 open verdicts. To have 28 open verdicts does seem an awful lot, and particularly when you consider it in a small area.
Given the fact that bodies recovered from water have often gone into that water in an unwitnessed way, nobody's seen them go in, they haven't left a note or anything of that nature, and there may be all sorts of other circumstances around that death which are unsure, it's not surprising that a large number of these cases are returned as open verdicts rather than as, say, homicide or suicide.
There is speculation that some of the victims may have taken their own lives.
I know that the suicide rate for men tends to be a lot higher than it is for women. Is it not possible that these deaths into the canal are suicides?
I don't know, but I think putting yourself in a canal, you're not guaranteed to die, are you?
However, research shows only 4% of male suicides choose to take their lives by drowning, and even fewer die in canals.
Nathan wasn't suicidal. And if I believed for one moment that he'd fallen in there on his own accord, I'd leave it at that. Why would I torture myself? I think this is probably about the 3rd, 4th time that I've been back down here since Nathan was found. Yeah, I don't venture down here. Well, that's still there.
That's some of my brother's stuff from his funeral that we just put up there. There was a few more bits and bobs as well, but obviously they've gone now, but the reefs have stayed up.
I just can't believe that they're still there. 4.5 years later. Very, very emotional being down here. Really emotional. Even though I know that he's gone, you know, I still expect him to come walk through the door. I think in some sense, for me, I have to create I create an illusion that, he's still here. And that's probably my way of dealing with it.
When he was found, there was no sign of Nathan's wallet, passport or phone. And yet he still had his keys and a packet of cigarettes in his pocket. This fueled Tina's suspicion that he may have been mugged before he drowned. There have been a number of muggings around Manchester's canals, including one notorious case in 2013 where a gang was jailed for robbing a man and drowning him by pushing him into the water.
If someone pushes someone else into the water, there may well be no signs at all for the pathologist to find. Even quite a hard push may leave no sign at all, no bruising, no marks on the skin for the pathologist to see later on.
I've always felt that Nathan's was suspicious. When you actually look at all the facts, you look at all the official documentation, you look at it and you just think, well, it's obviously suspicious. Where was his coat, his wallet, phone and passport? None of them have ever been found.
Criminologists say that at any one time, there's likely to be between 3 to 5 serial killers on the loose in the UK. Every time a body is pulled from Manchester's waterways, rumours of the pusher are reignited on social media.
The police are obviously saying that it's not connected, there isn't a conspiracy, but whether that's a cover-up in itself, that there's a part of a wider investigation and they can't compromise that, I don't know.
When the pusher jumped from urban legend to front-page news, the police quickly moved to deny there was any link between the deaths.
There's been a review by myself and a number of officers where we've looked at these cases, and the reason we've looked at these cases is to give the family more reassurance that there is no evidence to support this theory that there's a serial killer at large. Most of these bodies, there is a definitive explanation behind it. Some people have gone swimming, you've got people seen staggering home, walking along the canal, and they've fallen in.
The police suggest one of the key factors behind the high numbers of deaths is heavy drinking.
Alcohol certainly plays a part in many cases of drowning. People are less able to anticipate danger, they are more unsteady on their feet, they're more likely to fall. And if somebody falls into a body of water in an intoxicated state, it's likely that the outcome will be more serious than it might otherwise have been.
When you put alcohol, occasionally drugs, vulnerable people next to all that water, you're going to end up with tragedies. We've had people go in here where they've tried climbing round the railings kind of to and from smoking areas. You know, most weekends, there'll be something that happens involving normally a drunk person and water. People are coming out later. They'll be half drunk by the time they've even landed in the city because they're having alcohol at home. There's no drinking on the streets, my friend. Well, I'll tell you what, we're not making the issue of the ones you've still got in your pocket. See you later. OK. So even before the night starts, you know, they're pretty vulnerable. You wind the clock on then till 3, 4 in the morning when they've had a lot more to drink, and it can be a recipe for disaster.
It's not uncommon for someone who is otherwise fit and well to go into a body of cold water and to drown apparently very rapidly. In other words, to disappear below the surface and simply not come up again.
I'm just going to check around the corner because no more than 2 months ago we ended up pulling someone out of the water around there. Don't know how he fell in, but the paramedics said another couple of minutes and he probably wouldn't have survived because of hypothermia. He probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. Certainly couldn't have gotten out by himself. So a very lucky man that night.
It was on a Friday afternoon, that Anne suddenly appeared in my office at the Crown Court in Bradford and told me that they'd found a body and they thought it was David.
2 weeks had passed since David Plunkett disappeared after an event at the Daytona. His body was found less than a mile away from the venue in the Manchester Ship Canal. An inquest suggested alcohol was a factor in his death.
If I'm drunk or if you're drunk, I can talk to you and you will answer me. It might make sense. Now, in our case, we didn't have that with David. He was on the phone, but our son couldn't speak to us. Now, that's not because he was drunk.
The screaming, the howling was so unearthly that you just felt it had to be something.
An explanation as to what happened between Daytona and the canal would be very welcome. Because we have no reason as to why David should have made that journey.
Former Detective Tony Blockley is heading to the location where David's body was recovered to search for clues.
Alcohol has been a feature in a lot of the cases. The suggestion being is that the people have been drunk and fallen into the water and died as a consequence. What alcohol can also do is create a vulnerability in you as an individual, a vulnerability that can be exploited by somebody else. Where alcohol has been involved in cases such as David, what it doesn't do is explain the screaming phone call. If you were drunk and you wanted to get a taxi, why would you leave the main road and go down an obvious side road which doesn't lead to anything particularly? Was he invited down that side road? Was he lured down that side road? Was he chased down that side road?
There was no evidence that David had been pushed or met his death by any criminal means.
Police gathered CCTV footage from the night David went missing. However, any useful evidence was compromised by the poor weather and lack of visibility.
We will never know if that phone call, the screaming phone call, was him being chased. It could have been an accident, but by the same token, it could have been a crime. And until you start to understand all these aspects of the investigation, you can't say it's one or another.
David had marks on his body that were not self-inflicted and wouldn't have been selected, wouldn't have been, you know, caused by him sliding into the canal. So David at some point tried to defend himself, and there were marks on his arm and on his lower body which would tie in with some kind of a struggle.
But the pathologist's thing was, well, you know, that may have happened, you know, as he went in the water.
It was coroner's view that David was on the phone when he was talking to his mother and he's fallen down a steep embankment. His phone was found on the embankment along with his glasses. But again, it was a male, late at night, very bad weather, intoxicated, near deep open water, and he's met his death.
It's been suggested that the screaming is as a result of him falling into the water. But had he gone over the railings and he'd fallen into the water, the drop into the water is some 8 to 10 feet. So it would have caused a splash, it would have caused a noise. The phone was found on the banking and Mum could hear the phone, so you'd have heard him go into the water.
The one thing that gives us a little comfort, and will be to my dying day, that the last words or the last voices David heard were ours. And whilst it doesn't alter the outcome, there's still that feeling that at least somehow we were with him.
85 people over the space of 6 years is a heck of a lot.
It is a lot of deaths going on in Manchester's canals, but whether that's just regards to how much canal we have here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we do have the vast canal network with the Manchester Ship Canal, the Bridgewater Canal and the River Irwell.
Whilst no one has suggested all 28 unexplained deaths are the result of the pusher, significantly, The fatality rate in Manchester's waterways is around double that of Birmingham. That's despite Birmingham having a more extensive network of canals, and both cities being a similar size.
Can't dismiss the fact that people have died in the last few years in very similar circumstances.
So what did you think when Greater Manchester Police came out and said, look, we've investigated this thoroughly, there's no serial killer, it's a myth?
They've not investigated it as though they were connected, and I think they ought to. I don't think we can just close it down and say, no, it's a myth and leave it at that. I think they should have a look into it.
You might have an individual who's found in the water, they're dead, there is no CCTV, there are no witnesses. We don't know how they entered the water. We will always think, is this suspicious? But then when we investigate it, we'll identify and try and find evidence to say, well, it's not suspicious.
It was 22 days before Souvik Pal's body was pulled out of the water, just 50 feet away from the warehouse project where he'd been clubbing with friends.
There must be an involvement of third party. That could be a stray case or that could be the serial killer.
Gemma Hale was with Souvik the night he disappeared.
We pretty much only just got in there, got to the bar because it was so busy, took so long to get a drink. So we hadn't had a lot of alcohol. By the time we'd all got in, he'd already been kicked out. But none of us were aware of that because the group kept splitting up. So we obviously thought he was with the other and the others thought he was with us.
At 10:55 p.m, a bouncer threw Souvik out of the club for jumping the queue to the toilet. Souvik sent a number of texts to his friends, but because it was New Year's Eve, the phone lines were so busy that they weren't received until the next day. CCTV shows Souvik outside the club with another man who has never been identified. Tony Blockley is visiting the site where Souvik's body was recovered.
Souvik walks away with another person. There are definitely two people walking away. As an investigator, I would want to know exactly who that person is.
The investigation team had gone to the college, universities, spoke to his friends. They'd done local press and made real concerted effort to try and identify this individual.
There was a lot of people who knew about it, was in all the newspapers and on the news. We were also flyering whenever we could at all the match days. So it does make you wonder why nobody came forward to say what happened.
The CCTV camera footage shows that two persons are going in the bank of the canal, opposite side of warehouse project.
At one point, the camera catches something potentially significant.
You see an individual start to try and climb over a 6-foot fence.
Police believe the climber is Souvik, attempting to get back into the club. But the fence is on the edge of the camera frame and he disappears from view.
If it hadn't been that he wanted to get into the club, why had he walked across a bridge, over a canal, and then come down the far side? And if it hadn't been that he climbed the fence, got into the canal and successfully swam across and then got out and climbed in, he'd have been absolutely soaking wet. And I know sometimes decisions can be made when you've had a drink that probably aren't as rational as you would think they are, but it seems to me exceptionally odd that that's what somebody would do.
The CCTV covering the canal shows one person leaving the area at 11:30. Police think it's the unidentified man who had been with Souvik.
I would argue that it's imperative in order to effectively investigate Souvik's death to identify that individual. Because whilst ever that person isn't identified, it's going to be a significant question that the family want answering.
Nathan Tomlinson is one of 85 people who've died in Manchester's waterways in the past 6 years. The coroner ruled his death was unexplained, leaving his mother Tina with more questions than answers.
Everything in Nathan's is still in that room. It hasn't been, you know, I'm not thrown any of it away. I've just kept it all in the wardrobes.
Why do you hold on to it?
Because it's Nathan's. Because it's his. I suppose only time will tell if I decide that I'm going to pack it all away. I just know that that day hasn't happened because I'm just not strong enough to do that yet.
Do you ever go in there?
I do, yeah, I do. Just to go into, open his wardrobe, you know, to go through his clothes, stuff like that, really. And I just like to sit on the bed. You just have to believe that you will get your answers sometime in life. It's all a parent can ask for, isn't it? Is you just get your answers.
Despite a number of searches, it took 2 months before Nathan's body was recovered.
I was relieved, obviously, that he'd been found. But that's when, you know, your questions really begin then. You just relived that 8 weeks of everything what you did in that 8 weeks, you know, where you went, who you spoke to.
Nathan Tomlinson was in a pub in Manchester. He went missing on a very, very poor night for weather. There was snow on the ground, there was ice. He had walked quite a long way. He was found upstream of the River Irwell.
Former detective Tony Blockley is walking the route Nathan supposedly took on the night he died, hoping to shed some light on what really happened. Nathan's mother believes it may not be him on the CCTV footage.
The initial CCTV at the Mitre Bar identified Nathan, but certainly in some of the latter CCTV, it's very difficult to identify Nathan visually. The quality of the CCTV is not good. Of course, it may be that because this is the estimated route that Nathan took to where he was found, that there is an assumption that this is Nathan on the CCTV. From an investigation point of view, it's always dangerous to make those assumptions without having any reasoning behind them, because it can lead you in a totally different direction. On the CCTV, you can see he's actually running. Why was he running? Could be a perfectly logical explanation that he was cold or that he wanted to get somewhere quicker, but there may be some other reason why he's running. It may be that he was being chased or trying to get away from something.
I wouldn't like to believe that, you know, somebody has purposely hurt him and he's then been put in the river, because then that's, you know, I wasn't there to protect him.
I've stopped the clock here and it's showing us it's 41 and 47 seconds. According to the CCTV and the times on that, it took 22 minutes. For me, it doesn't add up, because I would suspect that isn't Nathan on all the CCTV.
Nathan had told friends he was heading home, but according to the cameras, he was walking in the opposite direction.
So if it isn't Nathan, where was he? What was he doing? Who was he with? Perhaps he was on the CCTV somewhere else. It's hugely significant to find where Nathan was.
The rate of deaths around Manchester in the canals is highly suspicious.
To say that there's no foul play is very misleading.
Having examined all 3 cases, Tony believes there are several key questions that need to be answered by police.
In the case of David, he was ejected from a club and then he walked into a secluded location, which comes as a bit of a surprise, and I would ask the question, why has he gone into that location? And then coupled with that is the screaming phone call, which has never been explained and which is really significant in relation to his death. In the case of Sovic, what, where and how did he get into the water? Because that's never been established. So until that can be established, anybody cannot say that it's an accident. In the case of Nathan, he's walked a considerable distance before he's gone into the river. And having now walked that route, there is really some significant differences between the timings.
Tony is visiting Anne and Michael Plunkett to share his thoughts on their son's case.
One thing that does strike me is the phone call. I would certainly see that as very significant. Yes. And the sadness is David's death was so long ago, and I'm sure it's only like yesterday, but unless you know the answer, or unless somebody explains it, then you've still got this question mark over it.
Yeah. We don't know what panicked him, what made that screaming and that howling, you know, what caused that. We don't know.
To me, the only explanation is he had seen something which frightened him.
Something, or perhaps even somebody.
You know, I refuse to believe that in that vast number, which is a frightening number of youngsters, largely male, that there is not somewhere in that something where, for some people, this has not been an accidental death.
Having looked at the 3 cases, they are individual deaths in circumstances that haven't been explained, but they shouldn't be dismissed as accidents.
Tony's investigation has reinforced Santano's belief that the mystery man on the CCTV holds the key to solving his son's death. So he's launching a fresh appeal to find him.
This is for the appeal to the public, if they know any information. We have nothing to lose. So even if there is 1% chance, still we will try for it.
2 of Sovic's friends hand out flyers at the Man United game to spread the word.
Did you hear about Sovic Hall?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so basically we're just appealing for more information.
We're just looking for people with information.
Yeah, all right, no problem. I'll give you one of these. Maybe you guys can help with the urgent appeal for more information. Hi, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Cheers. Bye. He was a very good friend of mine, and there's nothing more I want for a lot of justice for him to be done, and for his family's sake as well.
Tony is visiting Tina Tomlinson to discuss his findings. He has serious doubts about the CCTV evidence which identified Nathan.
There's 28 cases which are open verdicts. And some of them will be accidents, probably. But some of them won't be. You know, just by statistical probability, they won't be. So on the basis of the timings and their location, I don't think that's Nathan on the CCTV. If that isn't Nathan, where was Nathan? Because actually, if he was somewhere else, there may have been other CCTV that showed him with somebody.
You've been a police officer and you've done your investigations, so it's nice to know that in my own head, I'm not going daft.
You're not going mad.
No,
you're not going mad.
No.
You're not going mad.
You do feel as though you are going crazy at times.
Nathan's property wasn't found either.
No.
So his wallet was missing, his passport, his phone, and his coat. So I suppose it could be that his coat's come off in the water and they're still in his coat, or it could be that Nathan was mugged.
You can't discount that, no, because everything would, I suppose, suggest that he was mugged.
Just over a week after he went missing, the body of a man has been pulled from the Manchester Ship Canal. Alex Darby has more on this for us.
Yeah, well, we were told earlier that a body was found...
Having reviewed the evidence, Tony has reached some conclusions about Manchester's canal deaths.
If the serial killer had decided to cause their deaths by pushing them into the water, how could that person guarantee that they would die? In which case, there would be survivors who would have come forward. And also, none of the individuals have marks consistent with a violent act, which one would expect to see. In the 3 cases I've looked at, I don't feel that there is a serial killer involved. Because I don't believe there's a serial killer, it doesn't mean to say that the 3 deaths that I've looked at aren't crimes. It could be that somebody has been mugged and pushed into the water or trying to escape, but to be able to categorically say that there isn't a serial killer, you would have to look at all the cases involved to be able to look at the similarities and the differences. Unless the police can prove that there isn't a serial killer, every time a body is found or turns up in water, the rumours and the speculations will continue.